Welcome back, everyone. As I'm recording this, 2 days ago, something very big happened. REI has terminated the whole experiences aspect of what they do. That includes REI Adventures, REI Day Tours, and all REI classes. All of those live under the experiences name, and as of 2 days ago, they are done. This is going to leave some very big holes in outdoor education. Let's talk about those impacts. Let's go. Okay, if you're new here, my name is Brett. I worked for REI for 15 years. I worked in stores a bit, but I mostly worked for, at the time, what was called REI Outdoor School. Outdoor School became Experiences. I'm very familiar with REI Experiences and how it works and how it worked and why it worked and the benefits of it, as well as some of its shortcomings. And so I really want to talk about this. 2 days ago, I was having a delightful lunch with my wife when my phone exploded. And it exploded because of this announcement. And the people that were exploding my phone were people that I worked with at REI, some of whom still work at REI, who were now out of work. Essentially, I was a senior instructor for REI Outdoor School. I was sort of second in command for North Carolina. I oversaw all of the instructors and trained them and observed classes and taught classes and things like that. I have to say, some of the best people I've ever met. Still in touch with a lot of them, still adventure with some of them, all wonderful people. And it's a credit to who REI at least was, if not who they are, as these people all came together, worked together, and are still friends. So it was a very interesting series of conversations and things like that. Essentially, what REI said was, with a goal towards being profitable, they are ending REI Experiences and all that encompasses. 435 people were let go. All of them were Experiences people. The people that I spoke to who lost their jobs were not given an option to move into a non-Experiences role. People that were full-time got a month of severance pay. People who were part-time, which is most of them, received essentially one additional paycheck, which is, in the scheme of things, really nothing. So the reason that REI said they were canceling these programs is because they aren't profitable. And that's true, but it's also nothing new. I ran these programs in North Carolina, and I can tell you, they are not profitable. It takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to open an Experiences location. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in fees and salaries and expendables to keep those going. And there's no way on a $60 day paddle that you're going to make that kind of money. But here's the thing. They knew that going into it. They knew that that stuff was never going to be profitable on its own. But we know that if you take a map and compass class, you're then going to go to REI and spend more money. If you take a paddling class, at some point, a student on a paddling class with me would say, hey, can I try your paddle? Why is it different than the paddle that I'm using that I was issued by you? And I can explain the differences. And then when it's time for them to buy a kayak, they go and they buy that more expensive paddle. So directly, it is costing money to run, but long term, it is helping income for REI. During COVID, most of the people that I knew that worked at REI headquarters who were associated with Experiences were let go. I feel like the people that are there now don't understand the value and the importance of what the Experiences crews did. My heart is broken for the 435 people that got let go, but it's also not that surprising based on the sort of things that REI is doing right now. I want to talk about what we have lost by REI Experiences being shut down. The first is REI Adventures, a highly rated travel company. I will say the vast majority of the trips in REI Adventures are subcontracted out. It is very hard to become an REI Adventures subcontractor. Most adventure companies look at the things they need to do and decide it's not worth it. it's very hard to become a subcontractor for REI. All of those roles are now gone. I can't speak firsthand as to the effect that that will have, but it's going to be broad reaching. I can speak firsthand to the effect of REI classes. So REI runs thousands of classes a year with tens of thousands of students, and really has a great impact on getting people outdoors and making them comfortable in the outdoors. Their classes, like a lot of the stuff that I do, were aimed at people new to the outdoors. The instructors were all very authentic. They all did the things that they were teaching. And that is something that I really took pride in when I worked for REI, is the authenticity of staff. We've seen a big degradation in that authenticity from REI employees. Last year, they fired all of the sales leads, some of the most tenured, experienced people they had. This year, they fired all of the experiences people, some of the most experienced, tenured people that they have. That, I think, really speaks a lot as to what's going on at REI right now. I want to talk about two specific classes that I think their absence will have a very big impact. And the first is called How to Ride a Bike for Kids. How to Ride a Bike is just what it sounds like. It is a class for, I forget the ages, I think 5 to 8-year-olds, something like that. You show up essentially at a parking lot, and 2 REI instructors and up to 6 children run for 2 hours through the process of learning a bike. It is one of the best organized professional ways to teach kids how to ride a bike. Kids would show up with their bikes. One instructor would talk to the kids and the parents. Another instructor would remove pedals from bikes. We would have the kids with big chalk, like make a parking space for your bike, make a place where we can keep your pedals next to your parking space. We would make a start line and a finish line for a loop where they could ride, all sorts of things like that. And it was a very nice, very good progression to go from scooting on your bike to riding your bike. At some point, we would put the pedals back on and they would start riding. A highly effective class, both for the kids and for the parents. It is far easier for me to teach your kids how to ride a bike than it is for you to teach your kids how to ride a bike, because I don't have any real emotional attachment to the child, whereas you do. So it's far less stressful. You know, we always said, just let us teach your kids. It'll work out way better. This class was offered just about every weekend. This class was taught by every instructor, at least in my market, that we had. If you were a rock climb instructor, you taught how to ride a bike. If you were a paddling instructor, you taught how to ride a bike. If you were a hiking instructor, you taught how to ride a bike. If you were a navigation instructor, you taught how to ride a bike. In part because we ran so many classes, we needed the people. And in part because it made people better instructors. It taught people the foundations of teaching. It was really sensational. A lot of us, most of us, dreaded teaching it because it's essentially like go to a parking lot, run a 5K, chasing a kid on a bike. And as much as we hated how hard physically it was to teach, it was super rewarding to see these kids go from not being able to ride a bike to being able to ride a bike. Super, super rewarding. I know that when I was working for REI, I left in late 2021 or early 2022. REI was doing about 15,000 kids through these classes a year. That is a lot of kids. That is a huge hole that is not going to be filled by anyone, particularly, I think, as well as REI was doing it. This is a huge loss. This is just heartbreaking because of how good that class was and the impacts and the outcomes that that class created. That is gone is heartbreaking. The other one that is problematic is what I do now, which is wilderness first aid. So on Tuesday afternoon, I got the email that changes were coming, and I would get an email from Knowles. The next day I got, or actually that night, I got an email from Knowles saying, essentially, if you have a contract for a WFA that is sponsored by REI between these dates, it's going to be canceled. If it's between these dates, you'll still get paid for it. I missed that by 1 day on a contract. So essentially on Tuesday evening, I had 7 contracts through the end of March to teach WFAs. 4 of them were REI, which meant they were canceled, and I just wasn't getting paid for them. I can't tell you how many WFAs REI sponsors throughout the course of a year, but it's a lot. And that those are no longer being offered is a problem. Besides the fact that it's a problem for me financially, it's a problem for the outdoor community. The way that sponsoring a wilderness first aid course works is you essentially have a need in your area, be it if you're an organization or an individual, you have a need for that certification. You call up Knowles and say, I'm interested in sponsoring a wilderness first aid course. There's a bunch of criteria you need to hit. You need to have access to a venue, which most people rent a venue, but you need to have access to a venue. You need to have insurance, some things like that. Nothing too difficult to deal with. And then for a flat fee, Knowles provides all the gear and the instructors, and then you pay an additional fee for instructor travel and instructor meals, things like that. Which means at a certain point in terms of enrolled students, you go from covering the money that you have paid Knowles to money that is now going in your pocket. And I forget where that line is. I want to say it's around 18 students, but that means from 19 to 30, that remaining 11 students is all profit. I could have that number wrong. There's some variation there on the way things work, but that's the general idea of how this works. REI was Knowles' biggest sponsor of courses. I am sure they're working on a plan on how to fix that. That's not my problem. My problem is that I've lost my biggest provider of courses. Now is a great time to buy me a coffee. Links down below. And this is leaving a big hole for people who need that certification. There will be far less wilderness first aid courses offered throughout the country because REI was saying, yeah, we'll sponsor those. Here's the thing. You can sponsor a WFA if you meet that criteria. So if you're like, I've got a Boy Scout troop and I need to run 6 people through a WFA, that's not enough to do it on your own. But if you can get whatever that number is, 12 more, you can fill it and run a course. You know, if you are associated with an organization, this coming week, I'm teaching a course for NASA. It's a closed course. It's not open to the public. So you could run a course like that for your organization. You could just be like, hey, I've got an outdoor store. I'd love to host a WFA. I don't even need anyone to run through it, but let's run one and we'll pocket the money that we make on it, right? There are lots of ways to do that, but you could do that. You could sponsor a course. So I'm going to throw that out there. If you're like, yeah, I would like to sponsor a course, call Knowles and say, hey, I need information about sponsoring a wilderness first aid course. Super easy, super doable. But that is a huge hole that those courses won't be there. Every Scoutmaster that goes to Philmont or Sea Base or Northern Tier has to have a wilderness first aid certification. If you work in the outdoors, you have to have a wilderness first aid certification. If you're doing a big trip, it's a good idea to have it. But I would say 35% of the people that I see on wilderness first aid courses are taking it because they have to. And it's going to be way harder to find a course now. Seems to me like REI's overall goal is mainly to be profitable, which is not a bad thing, but I feel like they're doing it at the expense of who they are as an organization. And for someone who loves the company and worked for the company for a long time, I was literally in an REI store yesterday, it breaks my heart to see the changes that are going on. If you have comments on this, if you have ideas on this, if you have questions about WFA courses, put them down below. I'm super happy to help out. You can also reach out to me at my email, brett@adventureotaku.com. Happy to help you with those things. I'm curious to see what happens with these holes in outdoor education, which are going to be gaping. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor, hit like and hit subscribe. On Coffee, you'll find my books, my gear lists, risk management charts, soap note, all sorts of things. It's all on Coffee. Most of it is inexpensive. All of it's pretty inexpensive. Easy downloads, super straightforward. Otherwise, I'll see you outside.